Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. We can send your student to the school of their dreams and send you to your dream retirement. Visit us at elitecollegiateplanning.com to get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of College Knowledge. I'm your host today, Joe Kerins. And one of the things that I usually would ask Dave if he knows, but I just found this out. If you are a fan of bagpipes and you've ever wanted to be a bagpiper, there is one school in the country that you can actually receive a bachelor's degree in bagpiping. And that would be Carnegie Mellon University as part of their music program. So I thought that was pretty interesting. It's pretty rare. I actually read an article that there was one bagpiper a few years ago that had the major of bagpiping in the entire country, and he was at Carnegie Mellon. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I'm excited for today's show. We have the honor of having a guest from Widener University. She is the director of the Master's Criminal Justice Program and a professor at Widener. Shana Maier, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me on the show.
So Shana, criminal justice, obviously, I'm sure that there's a lot of fallacies about it. We're going to get into different discussions today to kind of enlighten me and our audience. But What is your kind of story? How did you get to where you are? Did you always know that this is what you were going to do when you were in high school?
So the answer to that is technically it's yes, but totally in a different path.
Got it.
So in high school, I was definitely going to law school.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be a lawyer and loved criminal justice, loved the whole idea. I joined my clubs in high school about criminal justice and did observations in courtrooms. Like I was definitely being a lawyer.
Sure.
Then I started at St. Joe's University in Philadelphia. They had a very strong criminal justice program, and they required you to do an internship. And my junior year, I did an internship at the DA's office. It was a great experience, very, very great experience. But I remember vividly going home. I did the internship in the fall, and I remember going home and saying to my parents, like, this is great and I love it. And, I love criminal justice. And I really am interested in law school, but I don't want to be a lawyer. And they're like, well, that doesn't, we're not paying for law school. And you don't want to, this doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And I was just I just realized for a lot of reasons that was not the way for me to go.
Mm-hmm.
But I still love criminal justice. And at that point in time, but I didn't want to be a law enforcement officer. It was like everything lined up perfectly. St. Joe's started a 5-year program, which meant I could take graduate classes my senior year. I could stay on for 1 additional year and get my master's degree. And I said, I love the field so much. Let me at least do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that really changed the trajectory of my path because they allowed me to teach like a lab and research methods and to do research. And I worked with 2 amazing professors, and I really loved the research, and I loved academia, and I loved teaching, and I still love criminal justice. So I graduated with my master's from St. Joe's University, and then worked for a nonprofit agency doing research on a lot of different things. So still really love that research piece, and worked there for about 1.5 years, but missed teaching.
Okay.
So decided to go back to get my PhD. So I got my PhD from the University of Delaware. So that was a really long answer to your question.
Yeah,
it was always criminal justice, but I wanted to be a lawyer, and then changed it to go into academia.
Sure. And I think, in every major that exists in college, there's always a predetermined notion that this is what you have to do with that major. If you're going to be an accountant, if you're majoring in accounting, you're going to be an accountant who's filing taxes, right? If you're going into criminal justice, you're an attorney or, like you said, law enforcement.
Right.
So obviously you took a path that wasn't one of those. I'm just curious, what else could there potentially be that maybe families aren't aware of, that there could be potential career paths that lead from that study?
So within criminal justice, there's so much, and that's sometimes a little bit frustrating when I do open houses and when I do accepted students day is, a lot of times individuals think because of media that you're going to be a lawyer, police officer.
Right.
The other thing is they want to be CSI. They want to go into crime scene analysis, and that's criminal justice based. But when I have open conversations with students and I say, how are you in chemistry? And they say, I hate chemistry. How are you in science? I hate science. I'm like, well, this is going to be kind of a tough pull for you to go that way. So in terms of what you can do, I mean, there is the traditional things: policing, law enforcement, probation, parole. That's also very, very solid. A lot of our students go into probation and parole, but there's so much in terms of different areas and niches within criminal justice. A lot of individuals, a lot of graduates that go into victim services to work for different agencies, different nonprofits, different, crime scene investigation through the DA's office, where they're not lawyers, but they're working in the DA's office. A lot on there. Obviously, we know there's the correlation between substance abuse and criminal offending. So a lot of times they go into more of that side where they're working on like behavior and things like that. So there is, besides your traditional policing and lawyers, there's so much that students can do, but they really have to go in with an open mind in criminal justice to kind of see, I have students that, needless to say, aren't going and getting their PhD, but came in first week of their first year and said, I'm going to be a police officer. Mom's a police officer. Dad's a police officer. My cousins are police officers. And then somewhere around junior year, they say, no, I don't think so. But they come to that through the exposure they've had through the program, regardless of what criminal justice program you are. So, I mean, I think one of the biggest things, the take home points is once the student is there, to expose themselves to practitioners in the field. Sit down with a probation officer and say, what do you do? Sit down with somebody that does drug and alcohol counseling. Can I shadow you? What do you do? Can we go out for coffee? And to get those connections to find out what the individual does. And we have at Widener University, our junior year, they take a very, very strong careers class where this is what the course is about, to try and get them into a really better understanding of what the different professionals do within the system.
I like that. And I mean, that's, we've heard multiple episodes, and even your experience in internship can really bring to light not even just the path and what you may be passionate about, but what you don't want to do. Right. Exactly. And I think that's where especially the idea of job shadowing or finding out, how do you get to where you are? You see someone that's doing a job and you say, okay, this is exactly what I want to do. And building this roadmap kind of backwards and finding out, well, what are all the steps? Does undergrad matter? Does law school matter? Does, what job do I have to have out of law school to eventually get to that point and really create a roadmap? Because knowing what that path may be something you don't want to go through those steps, okay, well, I like that. So let me find something else that maybe is similar that I can have that passion, but a different pathway. I always think is important. When you kind of did your internship, and, I always like to talk about, the passion or the motivation. Was there anything specific that happened and you always wanted to pursue criminal justice? Was there any specific motivation you had that maybe other students currently may have to say, this is a field that I want to pursue? Was there anything, an aha moment in your world that happened in your past?
Not really. There was not an aha moment. It was just something that I found more interesting than everything else. And I know everybody has different passions. I have a 15-year-old that he's very interested in STEM. That wasn't what I was interested in. But I think one of and I always get asked the question from, like I said, I have a 15-year-old, so I have parents that, they're thinking of this and they're asking me the question. I think one of the there's three pieces of advice I always give. And that one is to do the internship, to see where your passions are, because I knew that I liked the field. Not to date myself, this was before we had all of the social media and all of the 87 versions of CSI. But I was picking up those crime novels. I was I was going to the movies where it was these crime dramas. I was on my own, looking into cases, notorious cases in the field. So it was kind of just what interests me. And I always say the easy answer is, if you don't want to read a book about what you're studying on the beach, you probably shouldn't do that. If somebody doesn't start to talk to you, I mean, I have relatives in accounting. To me, that's not my interest, but they don't mind having a conversation about accounting because that's what they like.
Yeah.
So if you mind having conversations in your free time or reading books about things in your free time, that's not where you should go.
Absolutely. I think that's a great piece of advice. And that is the passion or just the overwhelming. I mean, Dave has always said, and I agree with him with this statement, that if you love what you do, you're never going to work a day in your life. That's not true. Work is work.
Right.
But it makes the grind easier when there is that passion behind it. And so, as you've kind of mentioned within the criminal justice and so many majors out there, there are many career paths and so many fallacies. It's not a linear scale. This is your major. This is your job. It does not work that way. And, but I think understanding where so many children are struggling with, what do I want to do? Right. Parents are, they ask that question to their kids and it's always, I don't know. Like they like this, but they don't know what they want to do. I think understanding what you are passionate about and saying to a student, well, what do you enjoy doing in your free time that you don't consider work? You do it because you enjoy it. That is a great question to end up leading to. And then if you're kind of thinking there's something there, then all of a sudden, I don't enjoy doing that, or that's a boring conversation to me. Well, that's the job.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's so hard because you're asking a 17 or 18 that they have no idea.
No, absolutely.
And they almost shouldn't have an idea.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think that's fair. I have students that come to me because I'm also an academic advisor, and they're almost in a panic. I don't know what I want to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're in October, November of your first year. We're relax a little bit. It's fine.
Yeah. And you need time to find those, specifically you said that career path on how do you start to find, how do you job shadow? Like it takes time to ultimately figure out exactly what you would enjoy, as a career or as work. Right. Right. So you don't have to have all the answers, and a lot of great colleges that are out there, they do that. I mean, there are some colleges that you are not allowed to declare a major coming in. Right. Because they want you to learn how to retain information, use what you learn into a work environment. And then, hey, it'll come out, we'll help you find that passion, which is also important. So you don't need to have all the answers when you're 17, 18 years old, know. But again, finding a good school that has a good social fit, academic fit, we're on the big side of the financial fit, those are things that are just as important because, it's being in a good place and being happy will, without a doubt, help you find those, I think, paths down the road.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So when we talk about, kind of, I'll say your profession, what keeps you coming back? What do you find right now being the most rewarding experience with being a professor, with working with college students? What is it that kind of keeps you going? And what do you find as if someone else maybe wants to pursue your shoes, follow your path?
To go into academia?
If they wanted to go that route, what do you find is the rewarding factor of your career?
So I think there's two things. The first part is the teaching piece. And I love to teach, but the best part of and you could do this even if you're an elementary or a high school teacher, is I couldn't do a job or be in a profession where I did the same thing every single day in the office, where I might be teaching the same classes, but I can bring in different topics. So every day, every semester, there's things that remain consistent, needless to say, but there's things that I can change up. I've done this topic for X amount of semesters. I'm going to change something. And things in the field, obviously in criminal justice, there's so much to cover. So that is probably the first thing. The other thing, which is probably maybe not what people would what the audience would expect, is I really like working with alumni because you see where they've gone. We have such really good connections with our alumni, bringing them back to campus to see someone that maybe I had in an intro class or a criminal law and procedure class 10, 15 years ago, and now they're working for the FBI. So to make those connections in the field, almost like, I look at it almost like a spider web, where we still have the students we're setting free. But I get to see a lot of, and that's really rewarding for me to see these success stories. And to see also the stories like we're talking about, where they end up and they love where they are, but it's not where they intended to go. Yeah. And they're really making a difference within the field in some way, shape, or form.
Got it. So you mentioned a few things about the different career paths, and that, junior year, I love that idea of, the career finding, helping the students find the right career and what to do to find that. Is it a typical path? And maybe you can only speak to Widener, but if students do come in, saying, I'm going to be a criminal justice major, what are some of the things that those students need to know on what to expect as the pathway for that 4-year piece? Are there certain courses that everyone has to take? Is it that you start one place and then it starts to branch into that CSI or field agent? Like, right. What does it look like for students pursuing that?
So for most universities, and I could speak for Widener, but I could speak for most universities, there's a curriculum ladder. Okay. So I could sit down as an advisor and say, first year, you're taking this. Second year, you're taking this. And one of the things that I love about criminal justice is there's a lot of required courses, but the 3 required courses exposes you. Like we have a course on courts that students take their sophomore year. We have a course on law enforcement that they also take sophomore year. Then we have a course on corrections that they take junior year. There's a required course on juvenile delinquency. So our curriculum and most curriculums are well shaped that they get the exposure to the major components of the system. My course that I teach is criminal law and procedure, which is a great class for law enforcement, but also a lot of students that it's a requirement for our legal studies minor, because that's a great course for those going to law school. So most universities do have a curriculum. I know this wasn't your question, but in terms of the advice I always give to families, our curriculum is incredibly flexible. So they have electives and they could take a course on gangs and they could take my course on intimate partner violence. But the curriculum is flexible enough that the easiest answer I always give to family is always have your student, if they're not going to do a double major, pick up a minor. Okay. Make sure that the curriculum is flexible enough that you have a lot of electives in there. So you could take creative writing, you could take intro to business, but work with your advisor to shape out what a minor is, because when you're on the job market, and you have the loans and you have this experience and you have 4 years under your belt, to say to a potential employer, I have a double major in criminal justice and psychology. I have a double major. I have a bachelor's and a double major in social work and criminal justice. Yeah. If you can't do that, because a lot of times we have dual programs at Widener, where it's social work, sociology, criminal justice, political science, things that make sense. Yeah. But I have a student that's a French minor. Okay. So it's things that you wouldn't pick up. I have a student that's an accounting minor because he wants to do federal law enforcement, and it makes a lot of sense to have an accounting background. But shape that, because I think that when you're on the job market, that really matters versus saying, I took a course here and I took a course here and I took a course here. Yeah. To actually present yourself as saying, I have a double major or at least a minor. Yeah. So within the curriculum, have enough flexibility that yes, you're getting whatever your major is, that you're getting those key courses that you can kind of play around. You can kind of figure out what your other area may be in there. So I think that, to answer your question, yes, there's definitely courses you have to take, but there's a lot of flexibility. And I don't think that this is necessarily unique to Widener. I think a lot of universities do promote, double majors or minors, but make sure there's flexibility. Sure.
I love that answer. And it kind of brings up another question, because you've already given some great advice on make sure you're going in with an open mind. Make sure that you're doing the job shadowing, you're looking for internships. Now it's realize the flexibility that is there. Pursue double major, pursue minor for the versatility, what you look like after college. Along that same kind of line is potential advice. What about pre-college? Is there anything that students that may be pursuing, and maybe it's a question of you should try some things out to see if this is what you may be passionate about. But are there any specific skills or experiences, mock trial, debate? Is there anything that students should partake in that may look good on a resume for a college, as far as in like an acceptance side of things, or help them maybe say, this is exactly what I want, that students should pursue in high school? Or does that not matter as much?
I don't know if it matters so much. I mean, they're overall looking at the robustness of the application. So I don't think it necessarily matters if hypothetically a student played baseball versus did the debate team. I think they're looking for the well-rounded student for admissions. But I think any exposure that you can get in high school that maybe says this isn't what I want to do. If you want to be a communication study major and you work for your radio, you're a part of the radio station in high school, you're part of the newspaper, and you don't like it, that's kind of a sign for you that maybe you should kind of rethink things. So the first bit of advice in high school is just expose yourself to any sort of club that you can do, whether it's debate or things obviously outside of criminal justice.
Sure.
To expose yourself to all of those clubs or organizations that the high school offers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's definitely great. The other thing that I don't think families take enough advantage of is, and I understand that the student is in high school,
mm-hmm.
things are being juggled, but I think a lot of times they go to the open house, they go to the accepted students day, they have to look at all of these schools, which is great, but I don't think it's a bad idea. I actually think it's a good idea. Universities allow the student to come for the day. I have students, not as often as I think I should, but high school seniors, and most of the time it's usually in the spring,
mm-hmm.
where admissions will align with us and the faculty and say, who teaches on a Tuesday, Thursday? Because Joe is coming in on a Tuesday, Thursday. Can we take him from class to class to class?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's going to be a student that takes them to the cafeteria and shows them the feeling of campus.
Yep.
So the student gets a better sense, not only of the campus life on a Tuesday, Thursday, because what they see on a Saturday or a Sunday is not what college looks like when they're doing those open houses or those accepted students day. So maybe, you can't do this for all of the schools, but if you have maybe the top 3 that you like and it's geographically convenient,
mm-hmm.
have the student take a day off from high school and spend the day and see if it seems, and you use the word, the phrase earlier, like, is it a good fit?
Yeah.
It might look good on paper, but when they get there,
mm-hmm.
it's not what it seems. And they can sit through a class, and I'm not saying that they're going to be completely entertained in, but can they see themselves in the future sitting in a criminology class?
Yeah.
Could they see themselves sitting in a class on juvenile delinquency and see if it seems like the right fit for them by doing that their senior year?
Yeah, that is something that I have preached for a long time. When the red carpet is rolled out, and because I remember this specifically, that I made almost every mistake you can make as a high school senior. And I know for 100% that I went to the school I ended up going to, went to the open house, right? Get there, freshman orientation. And a week later, I'm saying, what happened to that campus I visited? What happened to that campus I was at a week ago? Right. The balloons are gone. The atmosphere is completely different. And so essentially, if it's, I even advise, where it's might be, if you can get a tour and you can sit in for a day, phenomenal. But even just an unannounced visit, just to go on a campus without a tour guide, right? You take the tour and you go on the campus, you go into the cafeterias. If you're a student there, talk to students, talk to professors. I've heard wonderful stories where professors' doors are open and somebody walks in and says to the professor, do you have 5 minutes? Because I'm thinking about coming here. Professors, everyone I've talked to loves that. They would love to have that conversation, but that's how you truly find out if that school has that social fit that you are looking for. It has been proven that when students are enjoying their time on a campus they love, that they are in a better mood. And when they're in a better mood, they retain more information in the classroom. When you retain more information, you get better grades. There's better internship opportunities that lead to better jobs. It is this compounding effect that happens. So make sure, I love that piece of advice, that if you have the opportunity to essentially take a day, right? And I like the Tuesday, Thursday as well, but take a day to see what it would be like, to ultimately, because that could avoid the I'm not happy, bad grades, transfer, change majors, which again, from a family perspective, that leads to extra years in college, and those extra years cost money, and it could have a very downside effect. So I love that piece of advice. I think that is one that every parent should take away from today's episode, is that definitely idea. And again, go to those schools with everything else that you just talked about, with the open mind, ask questions, and really see what things could be like for you. If you're interested in something, ask questions, and find those things out. That's great. When I look at criminal justice as a whole, and I mentioned that you've mentioned a few, that it's talking sometimes to parents at the acceptance day, that this is what it is. It's not exactly what you think. Is there any other, I'll say, fallacies or anything that is kind of hard for you to overcome with parents that might say, I don't think this is a good fit, and they might not just know what the actual pursuit and the different pathways and career opportunities? Is there anything that most families that you hear and you're like, that's not how this works, that's not what this is? Is there anything that maybe parents are thinking about now?
Not specific to criminal justice.
Okay.
I do think that parents, which I completely respect and understand, are very intent on because it's such an investment.
If you haven't seen it yet, we have a free college planning brochure at elitecollegiateplanning.com under the resources tab. This is a free resource that explains what college planning requires and how Elite Collegiate Planning serves these needs. And remember, plan early, pay less.
Making sure that their student knows exactly what they want to do. So just give the student the flexibility. So I think that that's one of the things to overcome is when you're working with a parent or talking to a parent, maybe October of the student's senior year.
Yeah.
And they say, he wants to be, or she wants to be, or they want to be a police officer. They're doing criminal justice. Just kind of take a step back and say, this is great. This is their plan, but also to promote to the student, like, it's okay that you are not 100% sure. Yeah. You don't have to sign this away in ink. You may get here, look at all of the opportunities that the university has. If you have the tiniest bit of interest, if you're going for criminal justice and you have the tiniest bit of interest in, and I'll pick something easy, business, make sure that the university also is a business school. Yeah. If you want to switch majors, it might not matter that they don't have, most schools have a business school, but if they don't have a nursing school, don't pick that school. Pick something that has maybe your plan B or your plan C as well, that you can you don't have to switch schools.
Yeah.
And I think once you get to your first year, if you start out with criminal justice and you switch to, which rarely happens, but you switch to nursing, those classes will still count as electives because your first year, you're taking your English, your math, your general ed requirements. So if you happen to have intro to criminal justice and switch to something completely different, it'll still count as an elective. You're still going towards the 120 credits. So I think that I wouldn't say anything to overcome, but just there's so much pressure on students to know exactly what they want to do. And I feel like it's okay not to.
Got it.
But have ideas. Have ideas. Don't come in and say, I have no idea. I have no, there's nothing worse than when you sit down with an exploratory studies student, which I usually don't get, but I'll get them in my intro classes and I'll say, what are you interested in? And they say, nothing. Not interested in anything. Not that I don't understand that and that I don't respect that, but that might be the student that it was okay if the parent or guardian said, take a gap year. If you're literally sitting with me saying, I have no interest whatsoever, maybe don't invest in the 4 years right then.
Yeah.
Like take a class or two, in English or math or just your general requirements at a community college. Take a few electives there. And this is rare. I mean, most students have interest, but that's a little bit where it's kind of the mic drop where I'm like, I don't know what to say with the student that has no interest whatsoever. That might be a student that it's okay to take a pause.
Got it.
To kind of figure things out.
Okay. One of the questions that I get asked all the time, and I don't know if you have this answer or not, but when parents have a child and they're saying, yep, we're going to be a lawyer, they're going to go to law school. How important is the undergrad education? Not, because parents are worried about the name of the school versus potentially the name of where you go to law school. Is there one that when you get out into the job market, after the fact that has more weight? Does it matter where you go to undergrad? If you go to what's known as an elite law school, is it harder to get into those law schools if you don't go to a well-known undergrad program? I don't know if you have that answer, but I know that's one that comes across my table all the time.
I don't know the answer to that for your elite law schools.
Okay.
I can say though, and this is not your question, but two different things. GPA matters.
Okay.
Period. Wherever you go, if you're at the best school and have a 2.8, you're not going to get into the good law school.
Got it.
So that's the one piece of advice is if the student wants to go on to graduate education, make sure the GPA is up there. Make sure it's really, really high. The other bit of information though is because most of the time parents and children and families that are coming, they're like, let me get through undergrad first. I'm not even thinking of it. Let me just get through the next 4 years. I don't necessarily know that's the best idea though. I think they should think long term. So if your student has any interest in doing law school or graduate school, see if the university that they're going to has an accelerated program.
Okay.
Like, so for example, where I went, the only reason I'm sitting where I am in academia is because St. Joe's University opened a 5-year program.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I could do it in a summer and one more year, and I have my master's degree.
Yeah.
Widener has an accelerated program. So it's a 4+1.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think families get as excited about, which I understand. They're sitting there with a 17-year-old. They don't get as excited about that as I think they should, because they're essentially at Widener getting a third of their graduate education wrapped in with their undergrad.
Yeah.
A lot of universities have accelerated programs. Widener and other universities, we have the 3+3 for law school, mm-hmm. where they do 3 years undergraduate and finish that up and then so they're, instead of getting a bachelor's and a law degree in 7 years, mm-hmm. they're getting it in 6 years.
Yeah.
So look for universities that have accelerated programs.
Okay.
It doesn't mean you're stuck with them.
Mm-hmm.
You could pick a school that has an accelerated master's program. And that could be really enticing your first year. And then you realize you want to go to Florida and you don't want to be stuck in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So you can still change, but I think the easy answer is pay attention mm-hmm. to GPA. I can't answer for the really elite schools of what they're looking for.
Some questions about that accelerated program. So is there anything, is it also more like a direct entry that if you're accepted to undergrad, this is the program you choose? Do you have to choose that at a certain point? Like, walk me through what that decision process would be like for a student.
So I can walk you through more so for the master's program.
Yeah.
So they apply to the master's program fall of their third year.
Okay.
Fall of their junior year. The only reason that they apply then is because it waives them out of a course that is a required course spring of their junior year.
Okay.
Which is a statistics research methods course. They don't need to take that as the undergrad. They take that instead at the graduate level. So that's mm-hmm. one of the courses, the undergraduate requirements that we waive. As long as they have a 3.0 GPA, I mean, you're applying just like you're applying to any other master's program.
Okay.
So they do the application. As the director, I look at the application. Another faculty member looks at it. And as long as because what we have to look at too is, can they handle taking 5 classes their senior year?
Sure.
They're still a senior with a graduate class or 2. Mm-hmm. So that's why we want to make sure that they do have that 3.0 GPA because they've shown, I mean, obviously in our program too, that's kind of like the bare minimum. Mm-hmm. I have a student that just applied because we're in fall of her junior year. Like, she has a 3.8. These are really, really good students that could handle taking 4 undergraduate classes, their fall semester of their senior year with mm-hmm. 1 grad. And then there's the spring of their senior year, they're taking 3 undergraduate classes and 2 grad. Like, they have to be able to handle 2 graduate level classes.
Okay.
So that's a little bit of the process usually apply, but it's not the type of thing. I have students that started as a psych major or something else. As long as they have enough wiggle room in what they still have left to fit in 3 graduate classes.
Okay.
And we waive one of our research methods classes, and then the other 2, it just counts as a general elective. We also require them to take criminal justice electives.
Okay.
So in other words, instead of saying you're going to take white collar crime, that's a 300 level course. No, hold off on that, and you're going to take it as a 600 level or a 500 level course. It's the same subject matter. It's an elective. It's just kind of swapping.
Okay.
You're swapping it out.
Got it. Okay. Now, I know that, are there any law programs that do have like a direct entry where it's almost you make that decision when you choose the school? And I'm asking this as I don't know the answer, because I do know that there are nursing programs where you have to get accepted as a senior, but when you're accepted directly already for those the extra years that are needed. And we talk about the flexibility, like, you're pretty much on a path at that point, where exactly. You have that. So I wasn't sure, is that anything that's offered on the criminal justice or law side?
Not usually where it's a direct admit until they get in.
Okay.
So it's the type of thing where it's like, if you have an X GPA, you're automatically in direct admission to Widener Law School, but you have to start the college process, the undergraduate process.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Very good. When I think about, criminal justice, I guess what always comes to my mind, honestly, is there's some politics that always come into play, without a doubt. Like, the two always seem to a little bit going hand in hand because, there's obviously we have the court system and some people agree with laws, other people disagree. And now it's something, well, isn't the law the law? Like, that's why we have arguments and things like that. How much has the landscape changed in the teaching side, because of what is happening on such a political, especially a political divide that we're in, that there is something that, again, like our Constitution, that is written and can be interpreted in too many different ways,
yes.
On two sides of the aisle. How much have you seen that change as far as, in teaching? Is there anything that the politics essentially steps in a little bit from the professor side?
Not so much politics as much as what's presented in the media.
Okay.
It depends what media, in terms of the courses that I'm teaching.
Okay.
In terms of how the media is spinning things, you can have, students observing media through a very liberal news station versus a very conservative. Yeah. Same topic, two different take-home points. Oh, yeah. Very much so. I've been asked this question a lot by family friends. And the answer is, it's harder for me to answer this question because I don't teach the policing class. I think if you were sitting down with someone, our faculty member who teaches the law enforcement class, you'd get a very different response. Okay. Because I think of where the divide is, because it's criminal justice. We don't talk about like your politics as much. Right. The most debate that I get into is marijuana legalization. Okay. And, in terms of what students think about that, like that's usually the juiciest topic that I cover in my class. But faculty, even when I teach, because I teach intro and I cover police brutality, those are 2 or 3 kind of more difficult classes to teach. And one of the things that I start out with is just this idea of mutual respect in the classroom, because it can get heated. Even those 3 days that I teach because of police brutality, because you have had individuals, and I say, just pay attention. You may have somebody in there sitting next to you that has had a horrific experience with the police. Really, really bad. The person on your other side, mom, dad, cousin, uncle, is a police officer and a really good one. Right. So just look at that whole idea. One of the benefits I think at Widener is the person currently teaching our law enforcement class, PhD, academic, was a law enforcement officer. So can really see both sides of what it looks like to kind of educate students on that. And it's harder. It's definitely harder when I'm teaching intro and I have engineers, business majors, people that only like their knowledge of the criminal justice field is what they see on the news and TV. So it does become a little bit of, and there's always things that come up in the news that are passionate topics that, and I think we want them to be able to critically think. This is why they're going to college. We want them to be good thinkers and we want to have debates as long as they're mutually respectful and everybody shakes hands at the end, which sometimes is harder than other times. I definitely encourage that, to come up, because there's always things that come up that are different trigger points for different people for reasons that you may not even know or understand. Yeah. I might be teaching, and I teach the domestic violence class, and sexual abuse and things like that. Like you have students with past histories of victimization. You have people coming in with all different backgrounds and experiences. So it does come up, but I think that there's healthy, or at least I guess I want to say professional ways to have those conversations in the classroom. I will say in terms of criminal justice, I also sponsor our career fair. I'm the one that runs our career fair. We have a career fair every February where agencies come. Law enforcement are hurting to recruit. So that's one of the things that I can see as an academic where it's coming in, where usually, I have a few law enforcement agencies, hey, can we recruit at your career fair? Now it's like, I'm getting ding, ding, ding. I'm getting the emails already because there's a hesitancy, for a wide variety of reasons that I'm sure the audience knows about, to have their 18-year-old say, I want to be a police officer, and what that looks like. So I think that that's one of the fields that there's a little bit more of where that political divide is coming in.
Yeah. And to hit on that, I still tout my favorite class. The one class in college that has stuck with me throughout my entire life was my Critical Thinking 101. It was eye-opening and essentially has me question everything I've ever read, seen. Where is this coming from? Where is the statistics? Where are the sources? And I think that we've gotten into such a headline. That's it, right? And not reading and really diving in that I have found extremely valuable. So I think, having, again, an open mind, critically think, don't take everything at face value, being mature right? And understanding that not everyone has the same experience as you, being, friendly, right? Like you said, shaking hands at the end of any type of debate is exactly because open debate is the way that, and I'm not here to say change people's minds, but you may see their point of view and be able to say, well, I don't necessarily agree, but I can see where you come from. I can see why you have that point of view. And as long as you can have that mutual understanding, that's where the shaking of hands essentially comes in, rather than well, you're wrong, I'm right.
Correct.
and that's where I think we are way too much right now.
And I always say to students, there's a difference between agreeing and understanding. I don't have to agree with that position, but at least look at what the position is.
Correct.
Where you say, no, I disagree.
Yeah.
You might walk out not changed. I'm not expecting to change anybody's mind.
Yeah.
And one of the things where I bring up these hot topics and I'll ask a question and I know what the classroom thinks. I'll say, I'm not asking your opinion. I'm not asking what side of the debate you're on. How would you argue for X?
Sure.
And sometimes with smaller classes, I've actually have anonymously, which everybody finds out, but asked their, where do they fall on something like marijuana legalization?
Yeah.
And I'll get a list and then I assign them to the opposite.
Sure.
Say, this isn't where you are, but I want 3 take-home points. How could you convince me of the opposite?
Yeah.
Which it just allows them, again, you don't necessarily change their mind, but just to think at the broader and to go in. I always say to students, go into everything with doubt. Everything can be twisted.
Sure.
In a different way in terms of, and not just the media, in terms of, I'm a researcher. And I always say these are my findings and I'm being ethical and I'm being honest. But if I went and had, I do qualitative research, so I do interviews. But I'm very honest saying if I had 40 other detectives that I interviewed, I might not get the same results. So just to go in with this critical lens and not take everything at face value.
Sure. And statistics are the same thing. You can win an argument by making statistics be what you want them to be if you know how to shift things. It's like, well,
and just wording.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
Wording.
Yep.
I give an example. It's funny. I just did this the other week in my class. I give an example where I say, show the twisting of statistics. And I say, imagine if I have a class of 25 students and I teach the class fall of one year. And that year I have one student cheat on an exam out of the 25. And then the following fall, I have 2 students cheat on an exam. The second year is cheating a big problem. And they all look at me and say well, no, it's 2 students. I said, but with those numbers that I gave you, I can go to the president of the university, the provost and the dean and say, we have a huge problem. The number of students cheating in my class doubled.
Yep. Increased by 100%.
It sounds different. Yes. It sounds different to say it that way. And I say, look at how we can twist that. And that's a lot of times what the media is saying when they say things like that, like you have to dig a little bit deeper to figure out what's really happening because everybody has a spin.
Yeah, absolutely. So along your research, I did notice that, extensive research on sexual abuse or, different areas of there. But I also know that you had some research done on safety on campus. And it is something that I'm curious about some of the research that you have, because I do know that there are families, and this is something that you've looked into that does have a concern for parents, especially teenagers, right, on campus, the safety. So can you just talk to me a little bit about what the original research was done, about safety on campus and what some of your findings were that maybe parents would find interesting or comforting, maybe or maybe not?
I think so in terms of the findings, I felt that overall, and it was a few years back, students understand fear and safety a little bit differently.
All right.
So they may not necessarily always feel safe, but they're not afraid. And then we found a lot of the findings in terms of who's around. Am I at night in a deserted area or a part of the campus where there's not a lot of people versus there's more stuff going on. From an overall safety perspective, what I would advise, having nothing to do with my research, and it's something that we talked about earlier, is yes, you can look. Every university is required by law to publish their crime statistics.
Okay.
Take that with some hesitancy.
Yeah.
Because if things are happening right off campus, they may not know about it. If it's not reported.
Sure.
There's no way, it's impossible to know about it. So they can't report something in their crime statistics that's not reported by the student. So one of the things that you talked about earlier, I think is great, is have the student talk to current students
Yeah.
in different scenarios, because they're going to be honest with you. They're going to say, I feel safe. I don't feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
Have the family member, if possible, if the safety is a concern, go to a campus at 7 or 8 o'clock at night on a Thursday night and see how much campus safety you see around.
Mm.
Do you see officers on bikes? Do you see officers in cars? Or are there tumbleweeds rolling through campus when no one's there? So if your student needs to go from hypothetically the library back to a dorm room, what are they going to encounter along the way? No one, or somebody on a bike, campus safety on foot patrol. So see what the campus, if there's any concern, look like at night, but most importantly, talk to other students. Do you feel safe? Where do you feel safe? What's going on? Because universities do a very, very good job, in my opinion, of keeping students safe. Because that is the worst thing that happens, not only from a recruitment and retention standpoint, but from a psychological well-being.
Public perception.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something bad happens, it's all over the news. And 100%.
And those are the students on campus that we have to handle, that we have to deal with and cope, along with everybody knows college life is very stressful. We're adding a whole other layer of stress that the university responsibly needs to address.
Yeah.
So they're very, very concerned about safety on campus.
Sure. Yeah. I have enjoyed every minute of our conversation today.
Thank you. So it went very quickly.
No, I mean, it did, but there was, so many pieces of advice. This is, I think, beyond what I was expecting today. I wasn't really sure, but the advice that you were giving is, I think, just across the board, phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
It's not just the, you can take all the advice that you gave and apply it to any student studying any major, right? Yes. Which I really appreciate. Yeah. The one thing I would want to at least ask, right, that I could focus in on Widener to kind of highlight you guys a little bit, is if there are students that are interested in your, criminal justice, potentially, hey, maybe an accelerated program at Widener, and they're a junior or senior in high school right now. What would be, you've already given so much advice, but is there anything that Widener essentially maybe does differently than other universities that they should kind of be, what's the pitch for, say, hey, if you're interested in criminal justice, this is what Widener does a little bit differently. Is there anything like that you would like to tout? So
my biggest, it's the same 3 take-home points from before that I think Widener does well. But not everybody listening some of you might not even know where Widener is. It's a little bit south of Philadelphia, which is fine. Yeah. But look for universities for 3 things. And I don't even mean criminal justice. Are there practicum and internship experiences? Is your student going to have the experiences outside of the classroom? And if a faculty member or admissions can't answer that would cause me as a parent with a student that's going to be looking for colleges very shortly, a cause for concern. What is the experience outside of the classroom? So that's one. Number 2 is, what's the flexibility in your program? Universities require 120 credits. If I'm going to pick something ridiculous, but if 80 of them are in business, the student doesn't have a lot of wiggle room to explore other opportunities. Yeah. And then the other thing, the other last point is just the idea of, if thinking further, and this is probably the least important of the 3, but is there an accelerated program? Is there a direct admission to a law school? Or again, I'm just speaking for criminal justice, but there's other accelerated programs. We have an accelerated program with our political science, where they do the years there, and then they start the MPA, the Master's in Public Administration. So what does the university offer in terms of accelerated programs? Because besides saving time, which is very attractive to the student, it's saving families a substantial amount of money. Yeah. So I would say to really look for those ideas. Yeah. Okay. And those, and again, nursing, business, whatever it may be.
Absolutely.
Not related to criminal justice.
Can be applied to all of those. And again, parents, students, as you can hear, it requires some work. Right. It's not a passive decision. It's a lot of money. It can be life-changing, good or bad. So definitely make sure that you take these different pieces of advice and realize that finding a school, doing visitations, if you're worried about, worried about safety, okay, go the route and see what, like you said, go through the zoos, see what that campus is like. It takes some extra steps. And
actually too, I think one of the things in terms of what Widener does is, as faculty members, we allow a lot of access to our students. So when you're going to the, in terms of what Widener, and I don't want to say they do it differently, but one thing that I think they do very, very well, they don't want to, the 18-year-old doesn't want to talk to me at Widener Day, at the Accepted Students Day. They want to talk to the junior or the senior that I have standing behind me. So at the end, I say, who has questions for me? Parents, guardians, who's ever here. And they all get in line to talk to the student.
Yeah.
Make sure, in terms of what the advice is, you're not going to know until you ask. But ask the people that's going to be in the same shoes as your prospective student. I'm not. I mean, I'm leaving, even when I used to teach graduate classes, like I have students that come to me and say, or prospective students, what's dorm like? I have no idea. I've stepped foot in dorms like 5 times in, X amount of years. Like, don't talk to the actual students that are there because they're going to give you, they're not selling the university the same way that a faculty member or someone in admissions may be. They're recruiting. The student that's the senior isn't really invested whether you come to their school or not.
Right.
But so they're going to be able to give you more of a candid response. So use that as a resource.
Wonderful.
And there's so much in social media too. Go onto social media and say, my student is looking at X university. Does anybody have somebody that's gone through there? Not the parent that maybe graduated 10, 15, 20 years ago, but get those experiences, even if it has nothing to do with major. What is campus like? Life like?
Yeah. And the only thing I might add to that is careful if you go social media and you ask that, right? As we said, that the critical thinking side of things, and I would say if you do have a question that is very open with that, have follow-up questions.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and that is a very good point because with social media, you're going to get the extremes. You're going to get that.
Exactly.
I loved it. It's just like a Yelp review for a restaurant.
Correct. Yeah.
It's people either raving about it or completely blasting it. But that's a really, really good point.
And if you have someone that I like that idea. I like the concept, that if you want to find somebody, you get that experience and then maybe you find the two extremes and say, hey, can I take 10 minutes to actually ask you about your experience, and then have a list of questions on, well, why do you feel that way? What happened? Right. For the pros and the cons. And you can kind of take away, well, was this just somebody that had one bad experience and it ruined their entire college life? But they, or was this other person, they did everything, the clubs, they went all this, really into everything that we are talking about, the good things to do. Right?
Exactly.
Like again, everything with a grain of salt is my wife, she said it last week. She said, well, there's always two sides to every story and then there's the truth.
Exactly.
So again, when you're hearing these things, make sure that you're doing that critical thinking and due diligence. But again, it all requires some work, some effort, right? Some hustle and some grind. But I think when you go through those, you'll lead to really good outcomes and decisions. So this, Shana Maier, this has been phenomenal. Really,
Thank
it has.
You. I really enjoyed this. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. And everyone, Shana, again, is the director of the Masters of Criminal Justice program and a professor at Widener University. So if you're interested in Widener, if you know where it's at and you're interested and you're looking at criminal justice, please make sure, you reach out to Shana because it sounds like she has wonderful advice and I think could answer some great questions for you, for your prospective students. Everyone,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. This has been fantastic. Everyone, this has been another episode of College Knowledge. If you like this episode, please make sure that you like, subscribe, and tell your friends about it. And we will catch you again next week. All the best.
Thank you guys for being a part of College Knowledge. Your support means everything to us. Please leave us a review and help us grow and help more families. Thanks for listening to the College Knowledge Podcast with your hosts, Dave Kozak and Joe Kerins. We hope you enjoyed this week's exploration of higher education, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. That's all for this episode. See you next time.